Hey everyone, just wanted to make a few brief comments about the Unit 4 discussion. As before, most of you did very well. Something I want to point out is that in the interest of trying to catch up with all of the scoring that I have to do, um, I left either minimal or no feedback below the rubric. Instead, I let the rubric kind of speak for itself. But if you have any questions about your score, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. We all did a really good job, I think, of discussing one of my favorite events to study and think about, which was the U.S.-Mexico War, or the War of North American Invasion. I'm always really interested by um, the level of responses that you all make about Los Niños Héroes. I know it's a very powerful story, something that really is inspiring in a lot of ways. And I have to also, mention that a couple of years ago I was in Mexico City um, doing research for my dissertation, and I was able to visit the monument that they have in Chapultepec Park to Los Niños Héroes, and it's just it was a really strange feeling. It was a very powerful feeling, but a kind of a strange feeling to be there and look at the monument in another country about a war that was fought, that my country initiated against another country, and this monument that's honoring these cadets who gave their lives, um, for patriotism, trying to prevent the U.S. takeover of the Southwest. Again, it's conflicting emotions, I guess, is probably the best way to state that. A few months ago, I was also in Nogales, Sonora, and it was interesting or I was interested to find kind of a smaller version of that same monument there to Los Niños Héroes. Their names were listed, and so on. So it's become a very important story in Mexico, and in part of Mexican nation building, providing a sense of patriotism and a shared past. Something that's interesting that I just want to point out is that there are some scholars who have cast doubt on the story, or at least cast doubt, as a couple of you did as well, on what we should take away from it. What good did it actually do that those 6 people gave their lives? And again, it's something that is inspiring, it is patriotic, but at the same time, they could have lived full, happy lives had they not done that. There's one group of scholars that actually questions the whole thing, like it never happened, or at least those people may never have actually existed the way that is claimed. I don't think there's a lot of evidence to support that, because there is evidence of the cadets. But their point is that we tell these stories to make us feel really inspired and want to be patriotic as well. We should realize that they're not always directly rooted in historical reality, or that maybe giving your life in that way isn't necessarily the best end or the best thing to aspire to. So I just wanted to point that out, just to give another perspective, another way of thinking about that. I was also happy that there were a few of you who were talking about the War of a Thousand Deserts, the reasons for the very deep-seated hatred between the Apaches and Mexicans. We need to remember that in that context, in the early 1800s, just after Mexico's independence and before or during the U.S.-Mexico War, when we're talking about Mexicans, we're talking about the Nuevo Mexicanos. We're talking about the people who were citizens of the Mexican nation, and technically Apaches and any other indigenous peoples, Comanches as well, they were too, although they didn't recognize that citizenship or didn't find any reason to make a claim on it. So we're talking about the same group of people that we're talking about as having populated New Mexico, those that kind of came out of those earlier conflicts between Pueblo people and the Spanish conquistadores. Their descendants, they are the Nuevo Mexicanos. They are the Mexicans who are involved in those conflicts. And then, of course, that war didn't impact New Mexico as directly as it impacted places like Sonora, Chihuahua, Coahuila, and so on, because of the trade. The Santa Fe trade was a big part of keeping peace with Comanches despite losing the subsidies that had been in place to maintain peace prior to independence. Also, the conflict with Navajos was a more important and more frustrating story for New Mexico. Raiding by Navajo people continued. Governors who wanted to kind of make a name for themselves organized, sometimes led, but usually just organized expeditions against Navajos. And as we read, people like Albino Perez, who came from outside as the new centralizing government was put in place in 1835 and 36, didn't really understand what the relationship was and created a lot of blunders that came at the cost of lives, Nuevo Mexicano lives, and created even more animosity against that kind of leadership. Finally, I want to apologize for the way one of the videos in the Mile was edited, the one where I'm talking about the disputed territory. I don't quite know why why it was edited in the way it was, but there's only one little blip where I talk about Polk and Lincoln. And so there was sort of a misreading of that what I was saying was that it was Lincoln who was trying to engineer a war. In fact, it was Polk. The evidence in the chapter helps to explain that, that it was Polk's efforts running on an expansionist platform in the election of 1844. He wanted to do anything possible, even provoke a war, to expand American territory westward. It was Lincoln who challenged that by bringing up the spot resolutions that were also part of the reading for this unit. So I just wanted to emphasize that once again. Thanks again for your hard work. Please let me know if you have any questions about the discussion, feedback, and we will keep going onward and upward.